Good morning, everybody. We have a very special guest, and this is Dave Griffin today, who's the fourth horn player of the Chicago Symphony. Dave joined the Chicago Symphony in 1995, and he teaches at Roosevelt University, and he was also with the Prairie Wind Quintet for a number of years. Let's see if we can find Dave here on our guest and bring him into the chat. There he is. Waiting. Oh, sorry, wrong person. Here we go. 1 second. There we go. Go live with David. All right. Good morning, Dan Gingrich. How are you doing? Hey, Jen Montone's watching. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hey, good morning, David.
Great to see you.
How are you?
Hey, fantastic. Thank you for joining me on. I feel like this is like the normal view for me. I'm always looking up at you, and you're a bit taller than I am.
We have to come up with a good name for this, like Los Dos Davids.
I think that's the Texas version.
Yeah.
The Midwest version is like two Daves, you know.
Yeah, man.
Oh, sure, yeah, we're the two Daves.
I love it.
Hey,
how
Dave,
are you?
I'm great.
Where are you broadcasting from?
I'm broadcasting from my living room. This is just the corner here.
Okay.
Can you believe that we have snow today?
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. Yesterday I was working out in the garden and it started snowing on me. I don't think that's ever happened before. Pulling weeds and snowing at the same time.
Yeah, it's April 15th, and we have a good dusting of snow out there. I woke up and there was snow falling and snow covering the grass, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
So I guess let's say hi to a couple of our friends. I know Dan Gingrich is watching. Hey, Dan. Todd Bauermaster's watching.
Wow.
I know we've got a few. Melody from Taiwan. She's your student. She says hi from Taiwan.
Sweet.
Sugan is on. Jenna Montes is on.
Okay.
Hans Klepsch is watching from Cleveland.
Cool.
Third horn player. And any other Sarah Ferenc is watching. Let's see, anyone else that we have?
Dan Vidikin, I think.
Dan Vidikin.
Hey, Dan.
That's awesome. Omri trumpet and hi, Daves. That's what Todd Bauermaster says.
Fun.
So I guess let's just start. You're from Indiana, correct?
Yeah, Valparaiso. It's about
Valparaiso.
50 miles from downtown Chicago as the crow flies. Yeah.
Did you grow up coming to Chicago often, or was it?
I think for a lot of people who grow up in the Midwest, like Chicago is the cultural capital. And my parents sure did take advantage of bringing us into the big city for museums and concerts and plays. So, we gravitated towards things Chicago, and we were close enough to Chicago that we could pick up the TV stations, and more importantly, at that time, 2 classical music stations here in Chicago. So that was wonderful to have those nearby.
Oh, wow. And what do you remember about listening to the classical music station? Did you have it on in the house or in the car? Or?
It's funny. A funny story about that. My dad would often turn it on, like as he was driving me to school. And after about 10 seconds, he'd turn it off. And he'd say, name that piece. And
no kidding.
I didn't know much of the repertoire, so I wasn't very good at it. But by the time I was a senior in high school, he was still playing that game with me. He turned it on. And I said, that's the Brahms Fourth Symphony, third movement, and that's definitely the Chicago Symphony. And we waited till the end of it, and sure enough, I got it all right. And at that point on, he stopped playing the game with me.
You beat the system.
Yeah.
Beat the game. He's like, he's cheating. He called the radio broadcaster.
Yeah, I might.
That's funny. Wow. So you had you have a few siblings? You have a larger family?
Yeah. This is probably the only thing people will remember me saying today, but I'm one of 12 kids.
Wow. That's fantastic. How did that affect, did you have older siblings that taught you music, or younger siblings that you taught music to?
Yeah, my parents wanted all of us to play either a band instrument or sing in the choir. So most of us did that. We had a trumpet, 2 older sisters played the French horn, a couple clarinets, an oboe, a trombonist, a drummer. So someone was always practicing an instrument.
Wow.
As I was growing up. And we
And
participated in the local band, of course, which was a very good program.
so what were your first memories of music? Do you remember like a sibling playing, or do you remember singing in the church choir?
Yeah, I remember hearing older siblings practicing after school, and occasionally my dad would go in and help them practice. My parents also had a subscription to a series called the Community Concert Series. And believe it or not, the first orchestra I heard live was the Leningrad Philharmonic. I
No
think they
kidding.
played in either Maryville or Portage. And they played the Shostakovich Seventh Symphony.
Gotta be
And I
kidding.
remember just thinking it was very long, and I sat on the floor of the
Yeah.
auditorium and
Yeah.
was just kind of zoning out. But for an encore piece, they played William Tell Overture, and I just loved that.
Yeah.
So that really piqued my interest in classical music at an early age, I guess.
That's crazy. That's like one of your first experiences in
Yeah,
classical music is Shostakovich 7.
exactly.
Oh man, that's like one of the loudest pieces I think out
Yeah,
there in the repertoire.
right, right.
And how did you decide to come to the French horn?
Like I said, two of my older sisters played it, and I guess I liked the sound of it.
Mm.
And I think at that when I was starting, there was an extra horn at home because we had a con single F horn, and my older sister Gabriel, who played it at that time, had moved on to a double horn that she rented from the high school.
Oh
So
wow.
there was an extra horn sitting around, and I picked it up, and I guess I had a knack for it because I know I didn't have a knack for sports. So.
That's funny. I always wanted to be a baseball player, but I just never. I'd strike out all the time. So yeah, it's like hey,
Right.
I can do this.
Right. Yeah.
That's funny. And who was your first teacher on the horn? Was it your sister?
Um, yeah, I got a few pointers from her. My first teacher was a high schooler. I'm still friends with. The name is Lee Shirer, and he's a
No,
freelancer in Chicago area. Still a wonderful horn player.
no kidding.
But he
Oh,
was one of these kids who could play the horn really well at an early age and just made everything very easy. A real naturally gifted person. So,
wow.
and then after Lee, I had several different short-term teachers, and then about my junior year in high school, I started studying with Dan Gingrich.
No kidding. You studied
Yeah,
with Dan in high school?
yeah, my junior and senior year. I like to point that out because people, he's got more hair than I do now, and people think that I'm older. But I just want to point out that he is older. So,
That's great, man.
yeah.
What was it like being a high school student studying with the young guy in the Chicago Symphony horn section?
Oh, it was wonderful. Dan was extremely helpful with a lot of things. He talked about note shapes a lot and
Mm,
musical phrasing, so it was extremely helpful information
wow.
and always super encouraging too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. He's such a positive guy and
Yeah.
so kind and warm. I must have been really great to have that relationship with Dan when you moved to the Chicago Symphony. I mean, you already
Oh
had a
yeah.
friendship.
Yeah, we had kept in touch too,
Wow.
and
Um,
yeah, it was
and then,
fun.
um, so when did you decide to make that jump between music lover to someone who's going to pursue that for their life? You know.
I spent summers at Interlochen
Okay.
in high school for
I
three
know.
years in a row, and Bill Vermeulen was the horn teacher there my
Okay.
after my junior and senior year, and uh, he was just so generous with his time. I've never had a teacher who is so generous with giving his time to students and so enthusiastic for music in general and the horn in particular. So that coupled with the fact that I had a chance to play in a very good orchestra, and we did some repertoire like Mahler 1, a Brahms symphony, and it was just such a thrill to sit in the middle of all that. So I really got bit by the music bug, I'd say, by the time I was in high school.
And what did you like about it? I mean, what interested you about playing in an orchestra? What interested you playing those pieces?
I liked the team, being on a great team, and also discovering these great composers that maybe I hadn't heard of before. And you get a chance to sit down and play them, and then you just realize what masterworks they are. So
Yeah, and that's, I think, for me, one of the things that I'm like, every time I play a piece, I'm like, wow, how much thought, how much genius is in these pieces, and how truly spectacular they are.
right, right. Even in the CSO a month or two ago, we got to do the Brahms Second Symphony, and I played that piece a lot, but it was a totally different experience with different conductor, and having your beautiful first horn playing beside me.
Oh
So
man,
it was
really great teamwork together.
yeah.
It was really fun.
I still felt like I was discovering new aspects of that old chestnut that we've played many, many times.
Yeah, I mean, you've taken that piece on tour and you played it, I mean, I don't know how many times in how many different cities,
Yeah,
but you still find ways to make it fresh and, keep it interesting and enjoy.
right, right, exactly.
Wow. What's it like to go on tour with the Chicago Symphony or any orchestra?
It's just a thrill. It's really one of the great things about being in the orchestra. I imagine it's like being an avid, baseball player making it into the major leagues and finally getting to play in Fenway Park or Wrigley Field.
Oh, wow.
And you just feel, that it's like a really, really special place for music. The CSO has played in fantastic concert halls all around the world. So many I can't even name them, but I feel extremely lucky. And the orchestra does sound different on tour.
Huh.
It's really great to hear how the CSO sounds away from our own hall, which has its pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
But it is a challenging hall to play in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we play in the Musikverein or Berlin Philharmonie, it's almost like, even it's almost easier to play somehow.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do kind of like in our hall to, swinging with a weighted bat, right?
Yes.
We don't have much reverb in the hall, and we kind of have to really sustain the sound to kind of create that. And I do feel like we have to be a bit more clear with our articulations, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of those. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we create our own resonance in the hall, but then you go to this hall where you've got, this amazing reverb, and you can hear everything across, and everything really blends, and it's like, wow, what a sound you can develop in a hall.
Yeah.
Like that,
And sometimes I've heard very fine orchestras that have wonderful halls at home. They come to Chicago and they sound kind of puny to me because they're not used to really digging into the sound.
I mean, that kind of like, it's funny that you mentioned that the hall creates the sound of the orchestra, but I mean, I think that's a huge part of the orchestra character and the brass tradition.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, looking back, on my 25 years, I'd say that we've had some great principals in the brass section, no secret about that really know how to make their tone ring. It's like that sound that lingers after the cutoff, and it rings to the very, very back of the hall.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that our great principals have in common, and that gets followed by the section players too. Like even when we're rehearsing something like pictures at an exhibition, I'm always amazed at how at some of the phrase endings or cutoffs that the collective orchestra will continue to ring because of the way the sounds are being produced.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I also kind of noticed, I mean, our horn really helps, the Lewis horn really helps in the hall. It's like,
Yeah, it has that nice combination of some brilliancy, but also, the really great core to the sound.
Yeah. What I love about it too is that I feel like we can really play loud, but it doesn't distort on us.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like I'm lucky to play this instrument in this hall because Dale and Steve really worked hand in hand to kind of build this horn for this hall almost. It was like a test pilot with a plane.
Yeah.
You have this one, kind of, the hall, which is part of our instrument.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about how your journey to the Chicago Symphony. You studied in Chicago?
Yeah, I did my first years at Indiana University, and then my junior and senior year at Northwestern. Excuse me?
Who was your teacher?
I had many teachers. You want to say hi to the horn world, Pearl? This is my daughter, Pearl.
Hello.
Hey, Pearl, how are you? Great to see you.
You too.
Yeah, you staying warm today on the snowy, April day?
Yes.
Great
Very
to see.
unusual.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Are you
Well, she just
enjoying?
Pearl's probably some tea, so thank you, sweetie.
Yeah, thank you, Pearl.
Yeah, I was at Indiana University for 2 years. I had 4 different teachers, just because things were changing at the time. A little bit with Phil Farkas.
No kidding.
Yeah, Mayor Ramon, Mike Hatfield, and Bob Elworthy, and they all had great things to offer. So it was a nice experience. Then I really wanted to come to Northwestern and study with the CSO horn players. So I transferred for my junior year, and I mostly worked with Dick Goldberg.
Okay.
And then in my senior year, I think for my last quarter there, I switched to Norm Schweikert. And
Wow.
it was a very good balance of teachers there. So and then at the same time I was playing in Civic and had weekly coachings with Dale. So that was a great time in my life.
So you didn't officially study with Dale though at Northwestern.
No, he was on sabbatical,
Okay.
ironically. The 2
Mr.
years that I was there.
Schweikert and then Mr. Goldberg. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to just hear about what it was like to study with Mr. Farkas. I don't know much about him. I play one of his mouthpieces.
Yeah.
He wrote the book for us. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of cool for me that you worked hand in hand with him. You know?
Yeah, real gentlemanly. He always showed up for lessons in a coat and tie, and he loved telling stories about any piece in the repertoire, either a story about the piece, some of the background information about it, or he would tell a story about performing the piece. So, you really got a sense of history one way or another. And he did, I think the thing that he wanted me to change the most was, more covered hand position at the time.
Oh, wow.
So, we worked on that. He always felt like the horn should sound much different than the trombone, somewhere between the trombone tone and the trumpet tone. And he achieved that by a more covered hand position.
Oh, wow.
And you can hear that in his playing, but
Yes.
I think that's the one thing that he really stood for and reinforced with his students.
Oh, no kidding. Do you remember any of his stories about pieces or about, I mean, he created lyrics to like Don Juan that we can't repeat.
Yeah. Well, one time I was complaining about having a Monday morning at 8:30 lesson, and he said, well, that's all in your head. And he picked up the horn, at age 70 and played a perfect Siegfried Rhine Journey. So that kind of shut me up at that point.
That's awesome. What did you remember when you moved to Chicago? Could you talk a little bit about some of the lessons you learned from your teachers and some of the lessons you learned from the other students? Because you had kind of a phenomenal class, right? Todd Bauermaster was there.
Todd was actually graduated ahead of me, just a couple years older than me.
Okay. And Jim was probably
Jim was older.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a great combination of being in school and playing in Civic. And at the same time, one of my best friends, Bruce Hennis, who's a professor at Ohio State, he and I would go down every weekend and hear the CSO and hear our idols, play some incredible repertoire. Bruckner 7, Bruckner 4, Mahler 1, Galante dances. And it was week after week of hearing legendary playing. It was so inspirational.
Yeah.
It was just a great combination of being inspired and working hard individually in the practice room and getting great helpful information in lessons. The fellow students were just fantastic too. I played in ensembles with, so everyone had very similar goals and work ethic. So it was a very healthy environment.
Wow. And then what was your transition like between young student to young professional, or sorry, graduating student to young professional?
Yeah. After I graduated from Northwestern, I was lucky. I got a job as second horn in the Rochester Philharmonic, a very fine orchestra. I would call it an underrated orchestra. They played extremely well. It's just they don't get a lot of the recognition for it. Very fine ensemble. The thing that was lacking there was just money. They didn't have the budget for any large scale projects like tours, recordings, or doing Mahler symphonies every other month. It was pretty much a smaller schedule, but extremely helpful. I was there 4 years. I had wonderful colleagues. You learn how to count on your own and come in at the right time. That's extremely helpful as a young player.
Yes.
I went through some fantastic repertoire. So it was a very good experience.
Who was the principal horn when you were there?
Becky Root, and really a super strong player. Yeah, she was beautiful first horn. Who's this?
This is Muffy. This is my cat, and
Oh.
she comes and she interrupts every
Nice.
Fireside chat. So
Sweet.
yeah, it's just
I think I saw the little video clip of her drinking out of the kitchen sink.
yeah. I love animals. You have a pet as well? Oh,
Yeah, Daisy
she's
is
knocking over my stand for one drive.
Yeah, she's our 12-year-old golden retriever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. And yeah, that's I love Goldens. We were raised with golden retrievers.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep. My first dog was a golden, and then our second dog, the one who was probably the smartest, was golden. And yeah, it was. I mean, I kind of feel like, I mean, forgive me for saying this, but your disposition is much like a golden retriever. You're always happy. You're always smiling. You know, it's
I see my student Cindy from Taiwan is chiming in. She remembers Daisy.
Daisy.
She took care of Daisy one time we were out of town, and we knew she was in good hands with Cindy.
Sorry about that. The cat just keeps knocking over the stand. So I guess so you transitioned to Rochester, and then what were your auditions after Rochester?
I took several auditions, like third horn in Philly, fourth horn in St. Louis. I didn't win, but then I got associate principal in Montreal. So I moved from Rochester to Montreal, and that was just a fantastic experience. Within 6 months playing the Montreal Symphony, we had played concerts in Carnegie Hall, a 2-week tour of Japan, recordings for London and Decca, and a European tour. This was just like between January and June of 1991. No, 92. When did I start there? Anyway, one of those years.
It was with Dutoit?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I really felt like I was playing in a major league ensemble. It was a very elegant sounding orchestra. Dutoit was, a very thorough rehearser. So you felt the concerts were extremely well prepared, and he did the concerts just like the rehearsals. So there were no surprises. He wanted to, elevate the status of the orchestra. So he did that by tours, recording, high profile concerts. And it was a very exciting time to be a part of that fine orchestra.
What I love about the Montreal Symphony is just that they're so polished and so refined, but they have this subtlety and this flexibility, which is perfect for French music. And
yes.
They're kind of my go-to for any French recording. If I'm, studying a French piece, I always go first to the Montreal Symphony because that's the sound and the tone that I have in my ear for that kind of music.
Right, exactly. One story I remember, I had been in the orchestra maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and on the program was Schumann Piano Concerto. And in the third movement, there's a lot of rest. It's in fast 1. You count like a bunch of rests, and then come in on a high concert C sharp, ba, bum, like that. And in the middle of counting these rests, I lost my place. So I turned to the second horn, like, count. And he said to me, 50, 51, 52. And at that point, I didn't know any French, but I knew 2 and 3, and that helped me, get back on just enough. But so that was a good lesson in really learning to count my rests properly.
And learning French too, I bet.
Yeah.
Did you come away with much French? Did you learn?
After 3.5 years, I knew enough to express myself, but I never became fluent.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like living in I would say a different culture and also, a foreign country? Because, Canada is different than the United States.
It is. And Montreal, if you just add up the numbers, is pretty much half English speakers and half French speakers. Okay. But the minute you go outside the city of Montreal, it's exclusively French. Wow. It's just that I was living in a bilingual city. And anytime someone heard me struggling with French, they would just switch to English.
Oh, wow.
So you always were walking a fine line. People wanted to know that you were trying to learn French, but they wouldn't humor you enough to practice.
Yeah, that's kind of like Germany for me. They're like, "Oh, English, English is besser." Yeah,
Yeah,
English, yeah, Deutsch English.
right.
Then
So,
their English is like perfect, right?
yeah, the same time I was there, the Quebec secessionist movement was really at its peak. So there was a lot of, anxiety about the future.
Oh wow.
What the stability of the province, etc. So, I decided, it would be good to continue looking for a job, and it was difficult for my wife Sue to find opportunity up there too. So, we were happy when the CSO auditions came up.
Did you audition for the CSO directly after Montreal or while you're in Montreal?
I guess by my start of my third year,
Okay.
and fortunately for me, the CSO held those auditions for fourth horn. I think a total of 4 times from beginning to end. And the first 3 times they didn't pick anyone.
Wow.
I played preliminary rounds on 3 different occasions and never got passed on. An interesting story about the fourth one is that I had to make 2 trips to Chicago in May of '95. One was for my brother's wedding. My sister's wedding, Betsy, and Sue, my wife Sue, and I got there a day or 2 ahead of time, and we decided to go hear the CSO play. And it was a concert conducted by Donald Runnicles, started with the Mozart Symphony. In the middle of the exposition, Sue turned to me and said, "Are you sure you want to play in this orchestra? You play in a much better orchestra now." And it was just an off night for the CSO. But the beauty of that is at the next audition, it took all the pressure off of me. And I felt like, it's just another orchestra to audition for.
Wow. Yeah. When there's no pressure and it's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to let go of outcomes. I'm happy with the situation that I have, but I'll keep trying and just play and be myself there. Then you're allowed to kind of just be. And, there's no judgment of like, is this right? Is this wrong? It's just, this is me. I'm going to give the best that I can, the best version of me. But, at the end of the day, I'm going to let go of results.
Exactly.
What did you learn? Well, first of all, let me back up. How did you prepare for that audition while you were doing a professional job? And especially one that's much different than the audition.
Yeah, well, the students and people auditioning now today have it so easy with YouTube. You can find those horn excerpts like that.
Yeah.
I had a cassette tape that I assembled that had all of the horn excerpts on them, and a lot of them played by the CSO. So I would listen to that over and over again, just so I knew the excerpt in the context of the music. And I just tried to be in tip-top shape fundamentally, and made sure that my musical ideas were coming across. So I think you want to be in fantastic shape all around and have great strength to play through an audition, but also know that you can get things pretty darn right on the first try. That's so important. So I did a lot of recording. Maybe about 3 weeks before the audition, I'd start recording myself in a mock audition where you play the concerto and give yourself 3 or 4 excerpts, no backing up, and you just have to go on no matter what happens. So what you're doing is giving yourself a lot of audition experience prior to going there.
Yeah. And that audition experience is much different than practicing or performing, right? It's
Yes.
a different skill altogether.
Totally.
What did you learn about playing while you were preparing for this audition?
That was a long time ago. It was 1995. It's good to play for people, but I wouldn't overly do that. I remember I played for my wife a lot, and I give her most of the credit. But I also played for, 1 or 2 different instrumentalists. Robert Langevin, he was the associate principal flute of the Montreal Symphony at that time. He's now in New York Phil, and a fantastic musician. I remember he really worked on having me make the Mozart concerto sound à la brève rather than in 4. Same tempo, but he was getting the phrasing to sound more in tune. So it was helpful to hear a non-horn player's spin on a piece like a Mozart concerto. And the fact is, when you're playing an audition, a lot of the people on the committee will not be horn players. Yes. So you can, play for them as well.
So make sure our music goes across the lines. It's not just like this is good horn playing. It's like music is good for all instruments.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Music is music. And did you learn anything about yourself while taking these auditions? Because I mean, after trying 3 times, it gets a little discouraging, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, I remember I tried 3 times for the Chicago Symphony. I was like, I don't think I can do this again. I don't know if I can do another audition. And I think, they've heard me, and what more can I do? Like, I don't think they don't like me, and
Yeah.
and by the time, the fourth one comes around, it's like, okay, I guess I'll do it one more time, and I'm going to try this differently. How
Sure.
did you keep going, and what did you learn about yourself, about perseverance, and about
Well, I do
resilience?
remember that by the fourth time I took the audition, I was able to figure out some things I needed to do differently. Like in one of the early auditions, they had the Schubert Great C Major opening, and I prepared that piano, and at the end, pianissimo. And every time I played for that, they still wanted it softer. So I realized I had to find that really super sottovoce hush quality for that opening that they wanted in the CSO, and I was able to, take it to another level
Wow.
for that fourth and final audition.
Wow. And you didn't know it was possible, and
Yeah.
you're like, I think I can imagine this, and I can do it. And then you're like, let me see how I can, now I've got the imagination. Now let me find like the physical ability to achieve this thing that I imagined, or the thing that someone else can do, that's like, hey, that's possible. Holy smokes.
Exactly. You can always, improve things and push yourself to another level with good amount of practice, the right kind of practice.
What was it like for you to play with the Chicago Symphony for the first time? And was the first time you played, was it as a member, or was it?
I actually got to sub during my senior year, play assistant first to Dale on Mahler First Symphony with Lauren Mazel conducting. And that was an incredible eye opener. I had, the trombones right in front of me, Bud Herseth just off to the right and the row behind me. And just from the first rehearsal, everyone knew that piece so well and could play it so well. It was just easy to fit in there. And Dale was super encouraging and just wanting me to play more and more and more. So it was just an amazing experience for a 19, 20-year-old guy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's lucky. So coming back to the Chicago Symphony after having won the position, what was it like to be like, now I'm a member? Like,
yeah.
What was it like to be like, holy smokes, this is my group. I'm going to get to sit with these guys. Like,
yes, it was great. I felt like sound wise, I could fit in. I had the same horn that they played. It was very inspiring to be in the same section with 3 former mentors, Dale, Norm, and Dan. And they were all extremely encouraging and helpful. Because I was playing fourth and Dan was third, I remember asking him for tips and advice, and it was like pulling teeth getting answers from him. So I just decided that I'll do the best I could listening, and hope it would go okay. So it's I've kept that in mind as new section members have joined. I've been able to welcome 3 new section members to the orchestra, tutti players, Jim, Otto, and Sue, and I've tried to keep my comments and suggestions to a bare minimum and just trust them that which obviously they've done, just to listen and fit in. That's the courtesy that was shown to me.
wow. And I think that's a real gift, that you're like able to say, you have my confidence, and I trust that, hey, while this might be all new and you're figuring it out, I trust you can get there, and I believe in you. And it's like that support, it still feels like it's in the horn section today. I mean, even after, like many, many years of playing together, it's like, I still believe in you. I trust you. And like, hey, we're going to get this together.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, rather than just talking things. It is good to communicate, absolutely.
Yeah.
But just listening to each other, goes a long way too.
Wow. And could you talk a little bit about the Chicago Symphony horn section, the sound of the section, and also just kind of what, the vibe? Like,
Yeah, sure. Especially, Dale sets, the standard for so many years, which I think that we've continued, but he was a very exciting, dramatic player. He went for the extremes. He didn't care what this felt like, but he went for the fortissimos and the triple pianos and all of the colors in between.
wow.
So it was a very dramatic horn playing, and he always wanted to hear us going for it and not being cautious. That was never part of his MO, is being cautious about things. So I think that's carried on in the horn section. I feel that way. It's very, Sue hit this so well yesterday. I don't know if I can improve on what she said, but it's just, a lot of fun. People are always cooperating with each other and trying to help each other out. In a lot of, not only musical, but in scheduling things too. If someone has an important thing outside the orchestra, like recital of chamber music or an opportunity to play somewhere else, we always try to make it work. The answer is almost always yes.
Wow.
So
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So now I just would love to hear kind of like, those were your insights on Dan, and for Dale, you did come in and Gail Williams was in the section. You were with her for 3 years?
I think at least 4.
At least 4, okay.
Yeah.
So Gail is probably, I haven't worked with Gail in the Chicago Symphony, but I worked with Gail in the Dallas Symphony. She was principal horn on our European tour.
Oh, fun.
She did Mahler 6.
Whoa.
And I'll never forget, she dragged, she said, come with me, and we went to a music store, and she said, do you have this? And it'd be like a Urtext edition of a Beethoven symphony or a Beethoven sonata. And she'd be like, you gotta get this. And she's like, do you have this etude book? No, you gotta get this. And I remember I probably spent 450 euros that day just on music. And she's like, and those are just the bare minimum ones that she was like, you gotta get this. So yes, ma'am, and
right.
And she just she's so, just confident and secure. And, what was it like to work with her?
Well, she just defined being well prepared.
Yeah.
Every first rehearsal, she was ready to perform it. And everything she played in rehearsal sounded performance level.
Yeah.
So it was just, the epitome of professionalism and, being, a kind colleague. So it was great. I'm sorry that it ended, just after 4 years working together.
Well, I think she, is doing a ton of stuff with soloing and teaching.
Oh, yeah.
And her students, her studio is one of the strongest horn studios in the country. And
and it seems like they'll have very similar perfect embouchures too.
Perfect, right? It's like, it's just they're set up to play the horn. I'm just like, anyone that I'm just like, I don't I'm like, go to Gail.
Yeah, that's the common denominator there. Yeah.
So that leads me, how do you prepare for the amount of work that we have to do in the Chicago Symphony?
Well, for me, I make sure to have a really good morning session, anywhere between an hour and 90 minutes. That's just for me. When I work on fundamentals and lyrical playing and just making sure that I'm playing as efficiently as possible. I do that first thing in the morning.
Wow.
So that's the baseline. And at least, especially since this coronavirus thing, I always make sure to practice in the afternoon and, the evening a little bit as well too. Here on our block in Oak Park, every night at 8 o'clock, we have little, sing along with our neighbors. So we'll play a crazy tune and everything from Notre Dame fight song to Amazing Grace to, Twinkle Twinkle, just something, crazy songs that people can get out of their houses for a little bit and feel some camaraderie.
And I think that's what's, I'm sorry to, I want to hear more about your playing, but I think that's what's so important about music. That together we can feel a part of this greater thing. Like when you play a part, when you sing along, now all of a sudden we're part of, and it's inclusive no matter where you're from or what your beliefs are. And, it's just like, hey, we're part of it, and it's such a great morale booster.
Totally. Yeah. So I feel fortunate at least have a small audience during this time off period, but they're an appreciative audience.
That's awesome. You know, it's like we give in any way we can. It doesn't matter if it's on the stage of the Chicago Symphony or Carnegie Hall or, you know, in your block. You know, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Share music because we love it.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting back, I didn't mean to get sidetracked from your question. I'm always walking a fine line between too much practicing and too little practicing. And maybe over the long run, I'm learning a little better about what to do. But if I have a big concert at night, then I will obviously practice less during the day. It might just be one session in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon, and then the performance at night.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I'm feeling, you know, stiff, you know, I might take off half a day sometimes. But I'm really trying to, you know, tailor it to, you know, the current and upcoming needs, as well as to, you know, how I feel that things are at the moment.
How do you gauge that? And then how do you adjust your playing?
Yeah, it's like, okay, we were talking about the Brahms Second Symphony, beautiful piece. It has challenging parts, but for at least for the second horn, not extremely taxing. So on a week like that, I could do full practice sessions. I just have to make sure that the soft playing was there, the legato playing was there. There are a few big wide leaps, so you want to have some good flexibility. So I'm looking at that repertoire and making sure I cover all those things in my practice, as well as things that are not demanded during the performance.
Could you talk about what stuff you do in your hour to 90 minutes? Like, do you have a routine, or do you have
I hope it's, yeah, I would say it's constantly evolving, but it has some things that I've relied on for a while, like this book by Fred Tuber.
I don't know that.
Okay, yeah, it's very good. Or Teuber, if you want to pronounce it like a German. I think he was American, though. Okay. Some legato things from there. There's a book by a Brit named Peter Lawrence.
I don't know
that
that
has some very nice exercises and drills in there. I do slurs on the harmonic series, all sorts of different patterns, a lot of lip trills. For low horn, there's like three things that I'm always rotating. The Rochester trombone etudes, the Marty Hackelman, those are fantastic.
Yes.
Bach cello suites.
Yes.
And yes, I do the exercises and drills for low range and high range, but I really believe it's so much more important to play beautiful melodies down there.
Wow.
And that's what I like about those three things that I just mentioned. They will cultivate your low range as well or better than just doing, you know, exercises over and over again, which I admit are helpful. But I think if you have something compelling up in the song in your head, this will figure out what to do.
Yeah, it's kind of the musical solution for the technical problem, right?
Yes, wow. Exactly.
That's fantastic. How do you do the Rochus? You do them in the normal key in F, or
both? You know, if I get tired of playing them as written, then I'll transpose them to horn and C. Or sometimes I'll play them up an octave, buzz them on my mouthpiece, buzz them on my lips. I've gotten into that thanks to you.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I never really incorporated that in my playing, but this coronavirus thing, you know, has been good for trying different things.
Oh man,
and
that's so cool that you take like a little piece. You're like, man, I want to be able to do that. I'm gonna try that. Let me try.
Yeah,
this.
Right.
Such a great attitude that you have is just like, you know, taking different pieces from different players and different teachers and still trying it out and being curious about it.
Oh yeah, I'm a shameless copycat. So I've stolen many ideas from CSO colleagues, including you and other people around the world too. I'll steal any good idea.
Dave, could you talk about your chamber music playing and your solo playing? You were in Prairie Winds for
Yeah, that group has just, it's really fine wind quintet. We've made 2 recordings, and I would say maybe 4 years or even earlier, shortly after I joined the CSO, we started the group, and it for a while there we were playing 8, 10, 12 concerts a year, and it was fantastic. Like for those of you who have played in the wind quintet, you'll agree with me by saying, when I say that if you play a wind quintet recital well, you're in good shape.
Wow.
So that complemented so well anything I did in the orchestra.
Yes.
It's so it was really helpful to have that. When that group started quieting down, I got interested in playing solo recitals, and I love doing that. It's like a gift that you give to yourself. I'll spend 3-4 more weeks preparing solo repertoire at home, and that's a gift to myself. And the recital, it could go well, it could go not so well, but I've done all that prep work prior to it, and that really pays off for how I feel playing in the orchestra. First and foremost, I love orchestral repertoire. Yeah. I love playing in the CSO. But all that other stuff I do outside of the orchestra, chamber music, the solo recitals, that really factors in to being a complete horn player for me.
Wow. I just want to just touch on a couple of things you said. You said a gift. It's a gift you give to yourself, and I love thinking of like, hey, like most people are like, oh God, I have all this work, and it's like you're like, man, I get all this great music to practice. And I'm practicing 3 hours a day. What a gift I'm giving myself.
Yeah.
I mean, just that change
of
perspective.
It covers a lot of the technical things. Like your teachers tell you, practice articulated arpeggios.
Yeah.
It's very important. This is just one example. Well, to play the Beethoven sonata well, you have to do some very, relatively fast articulated arpeggios. Yeah. So why not practice the Beethoven sonata and perform it? So in my own practicing and with students, I always try to relate some technical things that we're working on to a great piece of music. Huh. One of the things I love to have students do is work on the Cherubini Second Sonata, which is a beautiful piece. It's written like an opera aria. But in order to play the solo from Beethoven's Sixth Symphony well, I think you've got to understand the style of that Cherubini sonata, and it's basically the same type of technique used in both. Wow. And yes, you could just practice that Beethoven 6 over and over and over again. Yeah. Or in addition to that, do something helpful, from the solo repertoire, and that's going to figure into how well you play the Beethoven. So
wow, that's such a great use of like, all right, technique and application and music.
Yes.
And then also now we're hitting the excerpts not just as a technical exercise and demonstration of your technique and musicality. We're using it as like, hey, I've done this music before in solo repertoire, so it's nothing unfamiliar to me.
Right.
Wow.
And even in my own practicing, I don't play some of the the great orchestral solos in the repertoire, but like if I'm working on scales in my practicing, I might play the solo from Barber Seville.
Wow.
The articulated one, so I can hear the effect that my practicing has on something musically relevant.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then lastly, you talked about the Wind Quintet being a complement to your orchestral playing.
Oh yeah.
Could you just explain a little bit more? What do you mean by complement? I mean,
sure. Fourth is a great job. You end up playing a lot of low and loud. No surprise about that. Wind quintet playing, you have to really cultivate the soft and sustained and great flexibility in the high range and quiet entrances in the high range. So it's I would say exactly opposite of playing fourth horn.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean it's just so nice to hear you say like, hey, this is what my job is and this is what I'm lacking, but I don't just stop at like, man, I'm not fulfilled just doing the fourth horn thing. You're like, how can I create things that also help complement and fulfill?
Right.
Dave, I'd love to just talk about your attitude. You have one of the happiest dispositions. You always greet everybody with a smile. You're always friendly. You're the first person to make a joke and make everyone laugh and kind of bring the mood up in the section. And I think your positivity is just contagious. Is there any secret to your positivity, or like anything that you could share with us about that?
Well, I just feel extremely fortunate And you know, there's so many rewards about being a musician. The great colleagues that surround me, so inspirational. That, you know, everyone's on the same page and wanting it to be great. You know, and I just feel extremely fortunate to be where I am. So I try to remind myself how lucky I am, and I think that is an important thing for all of us to do.
Absolutely, that gratitude. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
wow. It's sometimes it's really easy to focus on the things that I don't have, but when I look at all the gifts I do have, and you know the joy that surrounds me, it's that perspective, that gift of perspective that I think you've cultivated in yourself. That you know I'm going to look at life like this, and I choose to look at it and look at the blessings and the positives, and see the good in everybody.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's such a really, you bring so much to people when you share that, and also to the horn section. And it's such a gift to work with you when you demonstrate that.
We have a lot of fun and a lot of great years ahead of us too.
Yeah, I know. Dave,
Yeah.
before we end, could you talk a little bit about your teaching philosophy? I mean, you've kind of touched on that a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind, just talk a little bit about your teaching philosophy and.
Sure. I feel like, you know, as a teacher is a little bit like being the doctor. I try to give out good advice, but also let the patient heal him or herself. But I do also encourage like a steady diet of things. Yes, you know, younger students especially, have to spend a lot of time on the etudes and exercises and drills, but I want to show them you know, the fun stuff to play too. I want to really make sure that we're pushing that pleasure button. It could be just doing the excerpts together. It could be doing duets. It could be playing great solo repertoire, but it shouldn't feel like punishments. Like when I will never assign what's that low solo piece that people always play in Europe?
Noiling Bagatelle?
Yes. No, I will never assign Noiling Bagatelle or the Noiling etudes. They just, I like the Reynolds etudes. Those are great. I think those have more of a musical payoff. But I don't assign punishments to students. You know, I want them to play things that are musically worthwhile, and that will, you know, really speak to them, and you know, things that they'll might want to perform someday.
What lessons would you like to leave to impart on your students or share with your students?
Best thing that we can do as teachers is, you know, make ourselves obsolete as teachers after a few years, so that they will approach their horn playing by listening and, you know, setting some goals for themselves that will help them elevate their own horn playing.
Wow, fantastic. And do you have any advice for students that might not have access to ensembles or to lessons right now?
Sure. You have to avail yourself of all the wonderful things on the internet. You know, your interviews, what Sarah Willis is doing, and there's just so much great stuff on YouTube. I'll be the first one to admit that I waste time on YouTube, you know, looking at crazy stuff. But there's really lots and lots of beautiful music, and try to put things together on your own. You know, once all this craziness with coronavirus is over, get some chamber music groups going. You know, plan a half recital, you know, with another musician. But as my wife reminds me, that this is not a dress rehearsal for your next life. This is it. So, you know, avail yourself of all this great culture that's out there, and find an opportunity to play the Mozart Quintet for winds and piano. Find an opportunity to play the Cherubini Second Sonata.
Wow.
And do it over and over again too.
Yeah, unbelievable. I just you just reminded me of the arrangements that you made for the wind quintet when you were talking. You know, just like you made arrangements yourself, but then also you discovered this Mio.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, that's something that's really fun that you added to the repertoire. You kind of it was lost, and then you brought it back to life.
Yeah,
what was the Mio?
it was the La Cheminée du René, and yeah, there's I found the film that music comes from, and I made a performing version of it for wind quintet and film. Now we haven't done it recently, but now you mentioned it, maybe I should get it going again.
Is there someplace we can watch that online, or is it?
Not yet, but yeah, I should post that. It's interesting.
It's really great that you brought that back to the repertoire.
Yeah,
you added, you know, your own voice. I guess lastly, like, I just want to say thank you for your time, and thank you for, you know, meeting me. A couple of quick hellos really quick.
okay.
Jennifer Gunn was watching, and
Oh, sweet.
Jen says, thanks so much for this fun chat. Miss you guys.
Oh, sweet.
And then F Horn Mom wanted to show us where you could get the Toiber book. It's published by Medici Music. It's Progressive Studies in Flexibility and Range Development for French Horn by Fred W. Toiber.
Yeah.
So that's just a couple references to what we talked about. Lastly, in closing, do you have any just parting words of why music and the arts are so important during this time?
It's just there's a hunger and need for it that I think we're finding. It's even more acute now that we're isolated and can't be social. But people like that common experience of coming together and just being really moved by the arts. So I think we're all more aware of that. And I think in the long run, this is going to be a good thing for performing arts institutions. The short term and intermediate term, we can be worried about that a little bit. But people are going to want to partake of the arts more than ever after this is all over.
Wow. Thank you, Dave. Hey,
thank you, David.
Great to talk to you. I miss you a ton, man.
Miss you too. I can't wait to perform together again.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all for watching, and thank you again.
Okay.
See you soon. Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.